Well, good afternoon, everybody, and we'll get started because I know everybody wants to hear from our speakers. And I'm Sheriff Tom Knight, and welcome to the Sheriff's Office Emergency Operations Bureau. A little quick background, and then I'm going to get out of the way so other people can speak. House Bill 477 establishes mandatory minimum prison sentences as well as fines for drug dealers charged in connection with the distribution of fentanyl, heroin, or any number of fentanyl derivatives. If drugs continue to somebody's death, these drug dealers can be charged with murder now. As you know, fentanyl and its derivatives continue to wreak havoc on our communities and devastate parts of Florida and our nation, including right here on the Gulf Coast. With opiate overdoses and overdose deaths on the rise, the signing of this bill gives law enforcement another tool to combat this epidemic. Because the law enforcement alone cannot stop the loss of lives due to substance abuse, we must rely on other of our leaders, Vern Buchanan, Governor Scott, to push for legislation that holds drug dealers selling this poison accountable. What's most disheartening about the addiction is how it impacts the families and the victims. Thanks to Governor Scott today, this bill brings justice to families as well as our surrounding communities. Not only does this bill equip local law enforcement with the added tool, but also strengthens communities throughout Florida who are feeling the devastation of this epidemic. For me and the sheriffs and the police chiefs today, what's really neat about it is we have two legislators here in Sarasota and Manatee County that sponsored this bill, or co-introduced the bill. Senator Greg Steube, who's here with us today. Thank you, Senator Steube. And Representative Jim Boyd, who has representatives with us here today. On June 22nd, the Florida Sheriff's Association recognized Senator Steube and Representative Boyd as our 2017 legislative champions for their work in getting this legislation passed. The Sheriff's Association understands the value of good public policy and public safety and recognizes those who launch comprehensive legislation to address Florida's heroin and fentanyl epidemic. On behalf of the Sheriff's Association, we're grateful for Representative Boyd and Senator Steube for their dedication and leadership. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. I'm going to turn it on to Governor Scott. Just a couple quick thoughts on the governor as I see him as sheriff. Most of you know him as an innovator in business, healthcare, and politics, but most importantly, he values and understands the demands of law enforcement. Governor Scott realizes how this crisis is devastating Florida families and wants to put an end to it so our businesses and our families can flourish. We're honored to have the governor here today on the Gulf Coast and in Sarasota County, and understanding that we need harsher penalties for the dealers who are out there now creating this epidemic for us. Thank you, Governor, for everything you do, and thank you for making our communities a top priority. Thank you.
I want to thank the sheriff. When I ran back in 2010, I ran on a jobs platform, and we have clearly changed the direction of the state. We've added almost 1.4 million jobs. Last year we had almost 113 million tourists. None of that would be happening but for all of law enforcement. People want to come to a state, they want to live in a state that's safe, and they want to visit a state that's safe. And so the first thing I want to do is I just want to thank everybody standing up here and everybody around the state that's involved in law enforcement. Let's give them a big round of applause. And that, you know, what's most important is that we have great local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and federal. I can tell you with John Kelly, who now runs Department of Homeland Security, as soon as he was confirmed, we could start having conversations where everybody, federal, state, and local, were all working together. I want to thank Congressman Vern Buchanan, somebody I've known for a long time, and he's clearly focused on doing the right thing in Washington. And this issue, he has talked to me about numerous times to make sure, one, we do it the right way, and two, the money that's that was sent down here from the federal government was spent the right way. So I want to thank the Congressman for doing that. I also want to thank Senator Steube and Representative Boyd for all their hard work. This area of the state sends wonderful people to Tallahassee to focus on fixing problems, and both of them have done a great job. So let's give them a big round of applause. I grew up in a family that struggled. We had family members that struggled with drug abuse, and anybody that's had a family member that struggled with drug abuse, it's tough. And unfortunately, right now, if you look at what goes on, is often the person that's the individual or the group that's dealing with this is law enforcement. You know, a lot of these issues, it would be nice if there was an easy solution. There's not an easy solution. If we had, we probably would have done it already. But unfortunately, often the person or the group that's dealing with this is our law enforcement. Right now, as we all know, families across our state and our nation are fighting the opioid epidemic. Here in Florida, we're going to do everything possible to help our communities. When I first got elected in 2010, working with Attorney General Bondi, we focused on the pill mill problem. And I know Attorney General Bondi couldn't be here today, but one thing she did just recently is work with the manufacturers to see if we get a reduction in pricing for the naloxone and the drugs, or the not cures, but drugs like that to help our law enforcement. Has done a great job. So I just hope this never happens to a family. I mean, there's brothers and sisters, moms and dads, and we all know this impacts anybody that has this problem. It's not just their problem. Everybody around them deals with the problem. Their employers deal with the problems. Their friends deal with their problems. Everybody deals with it. So earlier this year, I directed the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Health, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to meet with communities affected by this epidemic to hear what our local communities are doing so the state can contribute, can continue to help. They've received a lot of feedback. I'm going to continue to work with the legislature, and I know I'll continue to work with the federal government to see if there's ways that we can do things from a legislative standpoint that improve the situation. I asked the Department of Health to declare a public health emergency so our state could draw down $27 million in federal grant funding to help these communities. That would not have happened but for Vern Buchanan and all of his hard work up there. I appreciate the Trump administration and Secretary Price for their partnership and focus on this national epidemic. I've had the opportunity to talk to President Trump and Secretary Price about the problem. As part of the federal funding, the Department of Children and Families has allocated $375,000 to FDLE for naloxone, so first responders have immediate access to this life-saving drug to respond to opioid overdoses. So we're continuing to work at the state level to do everything we can. Now, once Vern Buchanan, our Congressman Buchanan's going to talk, we'll do the ceremony of bill signing. So let me just talk about Vern for a second. So I met Vern a long time ago, but before I ran for governor, I was asking him a lot of questions about what it was like to run for office. He had no idea I was going to run, and he didn't talk me out of it. So anything that was bad that's happened in the last 6.5 years, I can blame it on Vern. All the good stuff, I can blame it on Vern because he made sure I did it. So I can just tell you, he's somebody that cares about this community and he works hard, and he married really well, Sandy.
Well, let me add to that story. I had a chance to meet the governor at that time, Rick, and we were in the golf cart together. We had a mutual friend down in Naples, and we were just sitting around. He kept asking me about questions. I was a freshman member, so and I was just kind of surprised about that. And then about 6 months later, he called me. He says, "You know, after we had that talk, I think I am going to look at running for governor." So, and I said, "Well, you know, your opponent's got a long lead on." He said, "It doesn't matter. I'm going to win." And you did.
Shocked everybody.
Yeah. But I want to give our governor for his leadership a big round of applause. And thank you so much. And I also add that we talk probably once a month or so on various issues, and a lot more lately because of health care and jobs over the years, because that's his biggest focus, but it was my focus too. But you get up there, you find yourself involved in a lot of other activities, and especially as it relates to this issue. We've been talking about pill mills and shutting down, and Nancy and a lot of us, that was something as a team effort. So when you look at the team up here, it's all of us working together, federal, state, local, city areas, our Tom Knight and Sheriff Wells, all of us working together to take this challenge on. I would just say a couple of things I wanted to kind of hit on and why it became so important to me. I'd say about 3 years into the job when I was here, I had 3 mothers come in. All 3 of them had lost their kids to pills and stuff like that. We had 1,300 pill mills. We had more pill mills than McDonald's in the state of Florida. So together we shut down a lot of those. But unfortunately now what's happening, you get the cheap heroin coming in, $20 a bag out of Mexico, wherever it comes, fentanyl coming out of China. So it's kind of like you stop one area and then you get the momentum in some other area. So it's a constant battle we got to take on. You mentioned about your family. I've got a nephew who was a competitive hockey player and had both his knees surgeries, and he ended up in a situation where he got caught up in the pills, and the pills ended up taking his, taking a lot of his life. I mean, he's still living, but it's tough for my sister, and I've worked closely with her through that process. So this affects everybody at every economic level. We had one of the most successful developers in town. You might have read about it in Sarasota, where he came home and found his granddaughter dead at 16 or 17. The father, and you knew the father real well, was a very good friend of mine, calling me and crying. And then I do a lot of town halls, and I've had mothers come up to me and say to me emotionally, "What are you doing? What are all of us doing?" The kids are dying on the streets, especially when you look at, unfortunately, Manatee and Sarasota County. I don't know why, but it's the number 1, number 2 counties in the state. The governor I talked to, we got those funds, but we want to make sure we get our fair share here. But I just want to thank you and thank everybody up here, as the governor mentioned, because obviously it's a big issue for our communities, and we're going to do everything we can to put the drug dealers out of business. Thank you, and God bless.
I forget, I should have recognized Nancy Dieter. It's somebody I got to work with, I guess, my first 6 years. And nice, easy years. No. But we got a lot of things done. And I want to recognize Joe Gruters. Joe just got up there a few months ago, and he's done a yeoman's job trying to get the good things to happen. Thank you very much.
You want the pen? It's early.
You're gonna be there as the bill sponsor. Go ahead. No, it's his bill.
This is a good day for our state, but unfortunately, every family's got to work hard to deal with this issue. And I know everybody's going to try to come up with the right solution. And I know all of us that are elected are going to keep working hard. But hopefully, we'll get some more tools we can use the law enforcement to help crack down on this.
Photo this way.